If you're Ross Atkins and you're running the ship here in Toronto, what do you need to do between now and August 1st?
By the way, just of note, since I just got back from Atlanta, a lot of talk about the trade deadline. His name and the Jays, they come up often as one of the more aggressive GMs out there right now. Obviously, nothing's happened, but nothing's happened around the sport either. So, he's trying. But if I'm in his shoes, I'm looking. I believe they could use a starting pitcher and an offensive piece of some kind, and they're going to need at least a bullpen piece. I'd try to go one of each, but that's really difficult to do in this environment because it's a seller's market, and each piece that you acquire is going to be pretty expensive. So if I was looking at one or maybe let's say two pieces, I might go two bullpen pieces if possible, because generally there's more bullpen arms than anything else. It's not a sexy move, but I think they've shown they're good enough for a postseason run if they could tighten up the bullpen, in my mind.
Yeah, well, Hoffman's an interesting one because, I think he's third or fourth in the league in saves, but he's got an ERA up over 5, which is crazy for a closer. Would you trust him in that closing role? Or when you say bullpen, do you think you need a guy that can close things out in the ninth?
Yeah. So I would, there's a couple guys, in one in particular that would fit really well there in Carlos Estevez, if Kansas City decides to move him, which I think they would, he can do both. They could do a co-closer type situation, right? So they could keep Hoffman in that spot and include Estevez. They could put Hoffman in the high leverage. A lot of these teams will use their high leveraged relievers earlier in the game. And you could have Estevez close. You could do Hoffman there. You could, they would give you a lot more give John Schneider a lot more flexibility to do both. If he could get a guy like Estevez, a Kenley Jansen, and the Angels right now are, on the cusp, and they're arguably in it. I expect they'll be aggressive if they're in it another week, but I think he's another guy that could be available. So somebody like that, I think, would be a perfect fit to kind of share the duties there with Hoffman.
Jim, early on you mentioned offensive piece. So where would you see, let's put the cost of acquisition to the side. Where would this offensive piece fit in the lineup if you could, wave your magic wand type situation? Well,
yeah, I think the hard part there to me is finding I know they're waiting for Varsha to come back. I don't think he's back yet, but I'm not waiting around. So there's, a Cedric Mullins is going to be a guy that's available. He's getting a lot of attention with teams like the Mets who could use an upgrade. I think to me, they could use some kind of upgrade in the outfield. You could even put Mullins in left field. So, and then, he's a guy that would give you versatility depending on, a right-handed batter. You could hit him towards the top, and against the lefty, you put him down, in the 7 hole like he's been doing with the Orioles, that kind of thing. And he's a really good defender, which they value. And so for me, a guy like that would be ideal, in that type of situation. So that's the kind of guy that I'm thinking. But again, they may decide not to go that route because of the expense, and just go pitching, which I would totally support as well.
How much of what the Jays should do is predicated on what the Red Sox or the Yankees might do? Does it become an arms race in the AL East because all three of those teams feel like they really have a shot at it?
I think you have to, keep an eye on them. So let's just say that, that Boston or the Yankees or both are more aggressive out of the gate and, make a deal here in the next couple of days. That adds added pressure. You have to at least keep up with what those two teams are doing. Ideally, it'd be better to be more aggressive. But I made this point the other day on my show that, the one issue you have with, being aggressive now is you don't know what's going to be available later. So we think that Arizona might sell, in another week or so. But if you go out and get let's say a Mullins, but you really would rather have let's say a Merrill Kelly is a starting pitcher, but you're not sure he's going to be available. Like, it's, being aggressive isn't always the best thing because you're jumping the ship a little bit early without understanding, and you're having to give up chips for that might get you somebody better if you're willing to wait a week to 10 days.